I never told my son about his father's hidden fortune, and I don't regret it. Susan Johnson trembled as she counted the bills for the fourth time that morning, always arriving at the same staggering result. $2 million in cash were hidden inside a black suitcase at the back of her bedroom closet. When she heard small footsteps approaching down the hallway, she quickly closed the suitcase and threw some clothes over it. "Mom, can I use your phone to play a game?" asked Tyler, her 11-year-old son, appearing in the doorway wearing the brown t-shirt she had sewn for him the week before. "Of course, sweetheart. It's on the kitchen table," Susan replied, forcing a smile as she shut the closet with excessive haste. Tyler watched her curiously, noticing his mother's nervousness but saying nothing. As he'd grown older, he'd developed a habit of observing the people around him, especially his mother, who always seemed to carry an invisible weight on her shoulders. Susan waited for his footsteps to fade before sitting on the bed, burying her face in her hands. It had been 3 years since she'd stumbled upon that money while searching for Tyler's birth certificate for school enrollment. What should have been a simple document search turned into the most unsettling discovery of her life. Along with the cash was a letter from Michael, her ex-husband and Tyler's father. His words still echoed in her mind like a painful whisper that refused to fade. "Susan, if you're reading this, it means something happened to me. This money comes from my honest work selling land, but dangerous people may come looking for it. For God's sake, never tell Tyler about my true financial situation. He must grow up believing I was just an ordinary worker. It's the only way to protect him." The irony was cruel. Here she was, working as a seamstress late into the night to pay overdue rent, while sitting on a fortune that could solve all her problems. But Michael's warning about dangerous people kept her awake, imagining shadows around every corner. Tyler had never asked many questions about his father. Michael had left when the boy was only 2, and since then, Susan had crafted a softened version of the truth. She told him his father worked for a landscaping company and had moved to another state for better opportunities. Tyler had accepted this explanation with the innocence of childhood, but lately his questions had become more direct and harder to answer. At Lincoln Middle School, where Tyler attended, the social divide was stark. While some classmates arrived in cars with new uniforms every semester, Tyler walked 15 minutes each day wearing the same uniform Susan diligently washed and ironed every night. She noticed how he watched the other boys with their brand-name sneakers and expensive school supplies, but he never complained. The first crack in the wall of secrets Susan had built came on a rainy Tuesday in March. Tyler came home from school with red eyes, trying to hide that he'd been crying. "What happened, sweetheart?" Susan asked, immediately setting aside the dress she was sewing. "Nothing, Mom. Just rain on my face," Tyler lied, but his shaky voice gave him away. Susan knelt in front of him, cupping his small face in her hands. "Tyler James Johnson, do you think your mother was born yesterday? Tell me what's wrong." The boy took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "The boys in class are planning a trip to the water park in Colorado Springs. It costs $200, and I know we don't have that kind of money." $200. A ridiculous amount compared to the $2 million hidden just a few feet away. Susan felt her heart shattering into tiny pieces. "Son, you know we're going through a tough time, right? But I'll see what I can do. Maybe if I take on some extra jobs." "You don't have to, Mom," Tyler interrupted, hugging her tightly. "I didn't even want to go anyway. Water parks are for little kids." But Susan saw the lie in her son's eyes and felt a silent fury toward Michael growing in her chest. How dare he leave them in this situation? How could he abandon them with money that felt more like a curse than a blessing? That night, after Tyler fell asleep, Susan opened the closet again and reread Michael's letter for the 100th time. Dangerous people might come looking for it. What people? What danger? Michael had never given details, leaving her in an agonizing uncertainty that gnawed at her peace every day. The phone rang at 11 at night, making Susan jump in fright. Late-night calls always put her on edge. "Hello? Susan, it's Jennifer." Jennifer was Michael's younger sister, someone Susan only kept in touch with out of politeness. They had never been close, especially after Michael left. Hi, Jennifer. Is everything okay? It's late for you to be calling. Sorry about the hour, but I need to talk to you. It's about Michael. Susan's blood ran cold. What about Michael? Susan, I know things ended badly between you two, but I got some information that might interest you and Tyler. It seems Michael left an inheritance before he left. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Inheritance? Susan feigned surprise, but her heart raced. What kind of inheritance? I'm not sure about the details, but a lawyer reached out to me saying Michael had investments in land that's now worth a lot of money. He said you and Tyler are entitled to it. Susan gripped the phone so tightly, her fingers turned white. Jennifer, I don't know anything about this. Michael left and never gave us any news. I know. But think about it, Susan. If there really is money involved, Tyler has a right to it. It's my nephew's future at stake. After hanging up, Susan couldn't sleep a wink. Jennifer's call couldn't be a coincidence. Someone was pulling strings, digging for information. But who and why after all this time? In the following days, Susan grew increasingly paranoid. Every person who walked past her house seemed suspicious. Every unidentified call made her tremble. Tyler started noticing the changes in his mother's behavior. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked one morning, finding Susan checking the door locks for the third time. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just making sure everything's locked." But Tyler wasn't foolish. At 11 years old, he'd already learned to read his mother's expressions like an open book. Something was making her nervous, and it worried him. Things got worse when their landlord, Mr. Wilson, showed up one Thursday morning with an unfriendly look. "Mrs. Johnson, we need to talk." Susan welcomed him into the small living room, offering coffee, which he refused with an impatient wave. "Ma'am, I know times are hard, but the rent is 2 months late. My patience is wearing thin." "Mr. Wilson, I completely understand. I have some freelance work coming in next week. I can pay everything by the end of the month." "Mrs. Johnson, with all due respect, I've heard that promise 3 times now. I'll have to ask you to vacate the house if you don't settle everything by the 15th. Tyler, who was in his room doing homework, overheard the entire conversation. When Mr. Wilson left, he appeared in the living room with a determined expression that Susan recognized immediately. It was the same stubborn look Michael used to have when he made up his mind. "Mum, I can work after school. There's a mechanic shop around the corner that needs someone to sweep and organize the tools. Tyler, you're only 11, your job is to study." "Mum, I'm not a little kid anymore. I know things are tough and I want to help." Susan hugged her son, fighting back tears. $2 million hidden in the closet, and her 11-year-old son wanting to work to help pay the rent. The situation was beyond absurd. That afternoon, while Tyler was at school, Susan made a decision that would change everything. She took a small portion of the money, just enough to cover the overdue rent, and went to the real estate office. She made up a story about selling some old jewelry she had inherited from her grandmother. But even that simple decision brought unexpected consequences. The real estate agent asked a few questions about the jewelry, seeming interested in buying more pieces. Susan had to improvise, saying she had sold everything to a private collector, feeling more and more tangled in a web of lies. When Tyler came home from school, he found his mother in the kitchen, preparing a heartier dinner than usual. "I managed to pay the rent, son. I sold some of Grandma's jewelry that was stored away." Tyler watched his mother carefully. "What jewelry, Mom? I've never seen you wear any." The innocent question hit Susan like a punch to the gut. Tyler was right. She had never worn jewelry, never had the money to buy any. Why hadn't she thought of that before making up the story? "They were old pieces, son. Kept away because they had sentimental value." Tyler nodded, but Susan could tell he wasn't completely convinced. The boy was growing up and becoming more observant. Keeping the secret was going to get harder. The following weeks brought an uneasy peace. Susan continued working as a seamstress, careful to keep up appearances. Tyler seemed more relaxed, but she noticed he watched her more closely, as if trying to solve a puzzle. The second wave of trouble began when Jennifer showed up at the door one Saturday afternoon, accompanied by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Dr. Richard, a lawyer. Susan, this is Dr. Richard, the one I mentioned on the phone. He has important information about Michael's inheritance. Susan welcomed them into the living room, asking Tyler to go play in the backyard. The boy obeyed, but she knew he'd try to listen in. Mrs. Johnson, Dr. Richard began, opening a folder. I have evidence that your ex-husband, Michael Johnson, owned several valuable plots of land in the Denver metropolitan area. These properties were sold shortly before he passed, generating a considerable sum. Susan's mouth went dry. Doctor, with all due respect, Michael never mentioned any land to me. He worked as a gardener. Dr. Richard and Jennifer exchanged a meaningful glance. Mrs. Johnson, the lawyer continued, I have copies of deeds here under Michael Johnson's name. It's impossible you knew nothing about this. I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about it, Susan insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. Jennifer leaned forward. Susan, you need to understand. If there's money, Tyler is entitled to it. It's my nephew's future. And if there is money, where would it be? Dr. Richard asked, watching Susan closely. I have no idea, Susan replied, but she knew she had hesitated too long. After they left, Susan found Tyler standing in the kitchen with a thoughtful expression. Mom, what's this about an inheritance? Nothing important, son. Sometimes people make up stories about money that doesn't exist. But they said Dad had land. Wasn't Dad a gardener? Susan felt the ground give way beneath her feet. Of course he was, Tyler. Sometimes gardeners work on large properties, but the explanation sounded forced even to her. That night, Susan moved the money from the bedroom closet to the attic, hiding it inside an old toolbox. Paranoia was eating away at her nights of sleep and her days of peace. Tyler started asking more frequent questions about his father. He wanted to know exactly where Michael worked, why he never called, if he had family elsewhere. Each question was torture for Susan, who found herself forced to weave increasingly elaborate lies. The situation became unbearable when Tyler fell ill with a high fever that wouldn't break. At the hospital, the doctor ordered expensive tests their basic insurance didn't cover. Susan paid for everything in cash, once again spinning the story about her grandmother's jewelry. But this time, there were consequences. The hospital social worker, Mrs. Thompson, a grey-haired woman with sharp eyes, took an interest in Susan's financial situation. Mrs. Johnson, I see here you're a seamstress. It must be a well-paying job to afford these tests in cash. I have a few regular clients, Susan replied, feeling her nerves tighten. And the jewelry you sold, was it a lot? Tyler, even sick, was listening closely. Susan noticed the questions were confusing him. Not much, just a few old pieces, she answered, wishing the conversation would end. Mrs. Thompson made a few notes that left Susan uneasy. Social workers had the power to investigate families, and the last thing she needed was someone prying into her life. When they got home, Tyler was quieter than usual. At dinner, he finally asked the question she dreaded. Mom, can you show me the rest of Grandma's jewelry? What other jewelry, sweetheart? You said you sold some. If there are any left, I'd like to see them. Susan swallowed hard. There aren't any left, Tyler. I sold them all. But at the hospital, you said you sold some, not all. The boy had an impressive memory for details. Susan realized she'd contradicted herself and didn't know how to fix it. It was just a way of speaking, honey. When I said some, I meant all I had. Tyler looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, not quite distrust, but definitely not full acceptance. The problems multiplied when Mrs. Adams, the neighbor next door, started making odd comments. Susan, dear, you've been acting so mysterious lately. Last night I saw a light in your attic very late. I was looking for some old things, Mrs. Adams. What kind of things? Maybe I can help you search. No need, thank you. I already found what I wanted. But Mrs. Adams wasn't the type to give up easily. You know, Susan, my granddaughter works at the bank and mentioned you've been making cash deposits. Don't you think it's risky carrying so much money in your purse? Susan's blood ran cold. How did Mrs. Adams' granddaughter know about her cash deposits? She'd been careful, using different banks, never depositing large sums at once. Mrs. Adams, I think your granddaughter must have me confused with someone else. Maybe so, but just a warning. There are a lot of thieves around here. That conversation made Susan realize her secrecy hadn't been as foolproof as she thought. People were noticing, talking, speculating. It was only a matter of time before the wrong people caught wind. Tyler, too, began acting differently. She caught him rummaging through old drawers, claiming he was looking for old photos of his father. "I want to see what Dad was like when he was younger," explained Tyler. Susan showed the few photos she had, all carefully selected to avoid showing Michael in situations that contradicted the Gardner story. But Tyler studied each image intently, asking questions about the clothes, places, and people in the background. "Dad is wearing a suit in this picture. Do Gardners wear suits to work?" "It was Sunday, son. It was a family photo. And that house behind him. It looks too big to be ours." "It was at Grandma Jennifer's house." But Tyler knew Aunt Jennifer's house, and that definitely wasn't it. Susan realized she had made another mistake. The psychological pressure was taking its toll. Susan developed severe insomnia, lost weight rapidly, and had anxiety attacks that left her breathless. Tyler noticed everything and grew increasingly worried about his mother. "Mom, you need to see a doctor. You're too thin and always tired." "I'm fine, son. It's just too much work." But she wasn't fine. Susan felt she was losing control of the situation. The lies were piling up, people were asking questions, and Tyler was growing smarter every day. The breaking point came on a Tuesday that started like any other. Susan was sewing in the living room when she heard voices at the gate. Through the window, she saw two men talking to Mrs. Adams. One of them she immediately recognized from old photos Michael had kept. It was Robert Miller, who had been Michael's business partner in land deals. The other was a stranger, younger, dressed in expensive clothes. Susan's heart raced. After 3 years, they had shown up, the dangerous people Michael had mentioned in the letter. She rushed to the attic and checked if the money was still hidden. It was all there, but for how long? If they were looking, they'd find it. It was only a matter of time. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. When Tyler came home from school, Susan tried to act normal, but her hands were visibly shaking. "Mom, did something happen?" "No, son. Why?" "You're pale and your hands are shaking." Susan hid her hands behind her back. It must be exhaustion. But Tyler wasn't convinced. That night, he pretended to be asleep and watched his mother. He saw her go up to the attic at 2 in the morning, saw her come down with a panicked expression, saw her check all the locks in the house 3 times. The next morning, the men appeared at the door. Susan answered with trembling legs, trying to keep her composure. Tyler was getting ready for school, but she knew he'd overhear the conversation. "Mrs. Johnson?" asked Robert, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Robert Miller, Michael's former business partner. This is my lawyer, Dr. Harris." "How can I help you?" Susan asked, gripping the doorknob tightly. "We're looking for some documents Michael may have left with you. Documents about properties we owned together." "I'm sorry, but Michael didn't leave anything here. When he left, he took everything." Robert and Dr. Harris exchanged a glance. "Mrs. Johnson, we understand this is delicate, but these documents are very important. We're willing to compensate you financially for any information." "I already told you I don't know anything." "Are you sure?" pressed Dr. Harris. "Because we have information that Michael hid some items before he left, items that include documents and other things." The way he said other things made Susan realize they knew about the money. "I can't help you," she said, starting to close the door. Robert stuck his foot in the door, preventing it from closing completely. "Mrs. Johnson, we don't want to cause trouble. But these documents are legally ours. If you're hiding something..." "Are you threatening me?" asked Susan, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Of course not," replied Dr. Harris with a fake smile. "We're just clarifying that we have legal rights to certain properties." After they left, Susan collapsed into a chair. Tyler appeared in the room wearing his school uniform, but it was obvious he had heard everything. "Mom, who were those men?" "They were acquaintances of your father. They were looking for some old papers." "What papers?" Work documents, son, nothing important. But Tyler wasn't a child anymore. At 11, he had learned to tell when adults were lying to protect him, and his mother was clearly lying. Mom, why did they say Dad hid things? Susan felt she was losing control of the situation. Tyler, it's just grown-up misunderstandings. You don't need to worry about it. But I do worry when I see you this upset. That afternoon, while Tyler was at school, Susan made a desperate decision. She took some of the money and looked for another place to hide it. She chose the sewing workshop she had set up in the backyard, hiding the money inside an old sewing machine that no longer worked. But even this precaution didn't calm her. If Robert and Dr. Harris knew about the money, they wouldn't give up easily. Michael had warned her about dangerous people, and now she understood why. The following days were torture. Susan kept looking out the window, expecting to see the men return. Tyler noticed his mother's growing anxiety and began his own investigation. One afternoon, while Susan was at the market, Tyler went up to the attic to search for what his mother had been hiding. He found the toolbox disturbed, with signs that someone had recently stored something there. He also found an old letter written in his father's handwriting. Tyler recognized it immediately. Michael had always left notes stuck to the fridge when Tyler was little. But this letter was different. It was for his mother, and it talked about money and dangerous people. The boy was shocked. His mother had lied about everything. His father wasn't just a simple gardener. There was hidden money, and apparently people were looking for them. When Susan returned from the market, she found Tyler sitting in the living room with the letter in his hand. Tyler, what are you doing with that? Mom, why did you lie to me? Susan approached slowly, as if dealing with a frightened animal. Son, you don't understand. I do understand, Tyler exploded, standing up from the chair. Dad left money, and you hid it from me. We struggled while you had money saved. Tyler, it's not that simple. Then explain it. Explain why we almost got evicted. Explain why I couldn't go on the field trip. Explain why you lied about everything. Susan sat heavily on the couch, defeated. The moment she had feared had arrived. There was no more hiding the truth. Sit here, son. I'll tell you everything. Tyler sat beside his mother, but kept a distance that broke Susan's heart. When your father left, he did leave hidden money. A lot of it. But he also left this letter warning that dangerous people might come looking for it. He said you should grow up thinking he was just an ordinary worker for your own protection. But Mom, we struggled. You could have used the money. And if the dangerous people noticed, if they came after you, I couldn't take that risk. Tyler fell silent for a long moment, processing the information. So those men who came here are exactly the people your father warned us about. And the money, is it still here in the house? Susan hesitated but decided she had lied enough. Fine. How much? $2 million. Tyler's eyes widened. $2 million was an amount beyond his comprehension. It meant never going without again. It meant college paid for. It meant a completely different life. Mom, we need to use this money. We can't live in fear forever. Tyler, you don't understand the danger. Then let's leave. Let's go somewhere those people can't find us. Susan looked at her son with admiration. At 11 years old, he was proposing solutions she didn't have the courage to consider. And abandon everything? Our friends, your school? Mom, what school? What friends? We've been isolated for years because you're scared. This isn't living. Tyler was right, and Susan knew it. Fear had become a prison, keeping them captive in their own home. That night, mother and son talked late into the evening, planning what to do. Tyler showed surprising maturity, understanding the risks, but also recognizing their current situation was unsustainable. Mom, what if we get help? There has to be someone who can protect us from these men. Who, son? We can't trust anyone. What about Grandma Jennifer? Isn't she Dad's sister? Susan sighed. Tyler, Jennifer is the one who brought these problems to our door. She showed up with a lawyer looking for the inheritance. So she knows about the money. She suspects, but she's not sure. Tyler grew thoughtful. Mom, what if we split the money? Give them part and keep the rest. You think they'd settle for part? Tyler, when it comes to money, people can get very dangerous. Then what do we do? Stay scared forever? It was a simple question that cut to the heart of the problem. Susan had spent 3 years living in fear, and it had solved nothing. If anything, it had made things worse. "I'll think of a solution, son, I promise." But as Susan spoke of finding a solution, their problems multiplied. Robert and Dr. Harris hadn't given up. They returned the next day, this time with a more direct proposal. "Mrs. Johnson," said Dr. Harris, "let's get to the point. We know Michael left documents and money hidden. We're willing to split it 50-50. "I've told you I know nothing." "Mrs. Johnson," Robert interjected, "we don't want to complicate your life, but we have evidence you've been moving cash amounts that don't match your declared income." Susan felt the ground drop beneath her. They'd investigated her. They knew about the deposits, the cash payments at the hospital. "You've been spying on me?" "We're protecting our interests," Dr. Harris replied, "just as you're protecting yours." Tyler, who'd been at school, arrived mid-conversation. Seeing the men at the door, he immediately knew something was wrong. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Yes, son. These gentlemen were just leaving," Susan said, staring firmly at Robert. After the men left, Tyler confronted his mother again. "Mom, they're not going to give up, are they?" "I don't know, son. Then we have to decide. Either use the money to fix this or run or get help." Tyler was right. Indecision was making everything worse, but Susan was still paralyzed by fear. What if she made the wrong choice? What if she put Tyler in danger? The decision was made for them. The next morning, Susan woke to the sound of shattering glass. Someone had thrown a rock through their front window overnight, leaving a note. "Last chance. Tomorrow night. Bring everything." Tyler saw the note and the broken window. His expression shifted from fear to determination. "Mom, that's it. We're leaving today." "Where, Tyler?" "It doesn't matter. Anywhere is better than here." Susan looked at her son and saw the courage she had lost long ago. Tyler was right. It was time to act. "All right, son. Here's what we'll do. We'll take some of the money and go to Washington, D.C. Your mom's cousin Margaret lives there. We can stay with her while we figure things out." "What about the rest of the money?" "We'll leave it hidden here. If they find it, so be it. At least we'll be safe." Tyler nodded. It was a simple plan, but it made sense. They couldn't carry $2 million on a trip, but they could take enough to start over somewhere else. They spent the day preparing. Susan packed only the essentials and a few sentimental items. Tyler gathered his favorite books and some photos of his father. "Mom, can I take Dad's letter?" "Of course, son. It's rightfully yours." That afternoon, as they finished packing, Jennifer showed up unannounced. "Susan, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Jennifer, now's not a good time." "Susan, Robert called me. He said you're hiding things that belong to them." Susan stopped packing and stared at her sister-in-law. "And you believe him?" "Susan, I know Michael left money, and I know you're keeping it from Tyler." "How do you know that?" "Because Michael told me before he passed. He said he left everything with you to protect Tyler." Susan was shocked. Michael had told his sister. Why hadn't he mentioned it in the letter? "If you knew, why did you bring those men to my door?" "Because Robert came to me first. He said he had a right to the money because they were partners. I believed him." Tyler walked into the room, interrupting the conversation. "Aunt Jennifer, what are you doing here?" "Tyler, sweetheart, I came to talk to your mom about something important." "About the money Dad left?" Jennifer looked surprised at Susan. "You told him?" "He figured it out on his own." Jennifer sat beside Tyler. "Nephew, your mom's right to be scared, but hiding isn't the solution." "What do you think we should do?" Tyler asked. "I think you should leave town for a while. At least until these people forget about it." "That's exactly what we're doing," Susan said. "Good, and I'll help. I can cover for you. Say you went to visit family out of town." Tyler liked the idea. "Aunt Jennifer, can you keep an eye on the house?" "Of course, sweetheart." That night, Susan and Tyler left for Washington, D.C. with a small suitcase and $300,000 in cash. It was a large sum, but only a fraction of what remained hidden. The bus ride took 5 hours, and Tyler spent most of it staring out the window, thinking about the future. It was his first time leaving Denver, and everything felt like an adventure. "Mom, what's Cousin Margaret like?" "She's a good person, Tyler. She works at a school, teaches math. I haven't seen her in years, but we were always close." "Will she let us stay with her?" "Margaret always said our home was hers. I'm sure she'll welcome us." Margaret Brown greeted them with open arms. She was a 58-year-old woman with graying hair and a warm smile that immediately put Tyler at ease. "Susan, what a wonderful surprise. And this must be Tyler. I haven't seen you since you were a baby." Margaret didn't ask why they'd come so suddenly. She simply prepared the guest room and made a special dinner for them. Over the meal, Tyler was charmed by her stories about Washington, D.C. The city had been built when she was young, and she'd witnessed its transformation. "Tyler, did you know Washington, D.C. was built in less than 4 years? Imagine how amazing it must have been to see an entire city rise from nothing." "Cousin Margaret," Susan interrupted, "we need to talk about our situation. We didn't just come for a visit." Margaret noticed the seriousness in Susan's tone. "Of course, dear. Tyler, why don't you go watch TV in the bedroom? I have some cartoons recorded." After Tyler left, Susan told Margaret the whole story. Her cousin listened quietly, asking specific questions but never judging Susan's decisions. "Susan, you did what you thought was best to protect Tyler. No one can criticize that." "But Margaret, did I really do the right thing? Tyler went through unnecessary hardships." "Susan, protection sometimes means sacrifice. You gave up material comfort to keep your son safe. That's love. So now what? What do we do? Now you rest, get settled, and decide your next steps calmly. You can stay here as long as you need." In the following days, Susan and Tyler began building a new routine in Washington, D.C. Tyler was temporarily enrolled in a nearby school, and Susan looked for work as a seamstress. But the feeling of running away bothered Tyler. During a conversation with Margaret, he voiced his concerns. "Cousin Margaret, we can't run forever." "That's true, Tyler, but sometimes we need time to find courage." "Do you think we should go back?" "I think you should do what brings everyone peace. Your mother spent 3 years afraid. That's no way to live." Tyler agreed. He wanted to return, but he knew they needed a better plan than just hiding the money and hoping no one would find out. The solution came from an unexpected source. Margaret had a lawyer friend, Dr. William Patterson, who specialized in inheritance and estate matters. She suggested they talk to him. "Dr. William can help you legalize everything. If the money came from legitimate sales, like Michael's letter says, then you're entitled to it." Susan hesitated. Legalizing meant going public, and going public meant the dangerous men would know where to find them. "Margaret, but what if those men discover where we are?" "Susan, my dear, they already know you have the money. The difference is now you'll have the law on your side." Tyler immediately supported the idea. "Mom, let's talk to Dr. William, at least to know our options." Dr. William Patterson was a tall, thin man with white hair and a serious but kind expression. He listened to the whole story without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. "Mrs. Johnson, your situation is more common than you think. Many people inherit assets irregularly and don't know how to proceed." "Doctor, but what if those men try to harm us?" "That's exactly why you need to legalize everything. Once the money is documented as legitimate inheritance, any threat against you becomes a crime." Tyler asked a sharp question. "Dr. William, if those men were my father's business partners, don't they have a right to part of the money?" "Tyler, that's an excellent question. It depends on the nature of their partnership. If they were investors in specific ventures, they might be entitled to a share of the profits, but that would need to be proven legally." Susan felt more at ease. Finally, there was someone who understood the law and could guide them properly. "Doctor, what's the first step?" "First, we need to document the entire inheritance. I'll need Michael's letter, proof of the land sales if they exist, and a detailed list of everything he left behind." "What if we don't have all the documents?" "We'll work with what we have. The important thing is to start the legalization process." Susan and Tyler returned to Denver the following week, but this time with a plan. Dr. William had prepared all the necessary documents and guided them on how to proceed. The first stop was Jennifer's house, who had kept her promise to watch over the property. She greeted them with relief. "Thank God you're back. Robert and that lawyer of his showed up here 3 times looking for you." "What did you tell them?" asked Susan. "I said you'd gone to the countryside to visit relatives and that I didn't know when you'd be back." "Did they believe you?" "I don't know, but they stopped asking." Tyler was eager to check if the money was still hidden. He and Susan checked all the hiding spots, and to their relief, everything was untouched. "Mom, now that we have a lawyer, can I say something?" "Of course, son." "I want to learn more about my father's story. I want to know what kind of man he was, what kind of business he did, why he had to leave." Susan sighed. "Tyler, I don't know everything either. Your father was private about his business. But Aunt Jennifer must know something. She was his sister." Jennifer, who had overheard the conversation, stepped closer. "Tyler, I can tell you a few things about your father." Over the next few days, Jennifer shared stories about Michael that Susan didn't know. How he had started by selling small plots of land and gradually built a thriving business. How he was meticulous with paperwork and always insisted on keeping everything legal. "Your father was an honest man, Tyler. If he left money behind, you can be sure it was earned the right way." "Then why did he have to leave?" asked Tyler. "That part I don't know well. He said he'd discovered something that put him in danger, but he never gave me details." Jennifer's information helped Dr. William piece together a clearer picture of the situation. They discovered that Michael had only been partners with Robert in 2 specific transactions, representing a small fraction of his total business. "This means Robert is only entitled to a small portion of the money, not half as he's claiming," explained Dr. William. Susan felt relieved. "So he's trying to cheat us?" "Exactly. And now that we have the right documents, we can prove it." The final confrontation took place in a neutral office, with Dr. William mediating the meeting between Susan and Robert. Tyler insisted on being there, arguing that it was his future being decided. Robert arrived with Dr. Harris, both confident they'd secure a 50-50 split of the money. "Mrs. Johnson," began Dr. Harris, "we hope our temporary absence has given you time to reconsider our proposal." Dr. William stepped in before Susan could respond. "Dr. Harris, my name is William Patterson, and I represent the Johnson family's interests. We've reviewed all the documentation and have some questions to clarify." Robert and Dr. Harris exchanged nervous glances. They hadn't expected Susan to hire a lawyer. "Dr. William," said Robert, "Michael and I were partners in all his businesses. I'm entitled to half of everything he left." Dr. William opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "Mr. Miller, according to our investigation, you were only partners with Mr. Johnson in exactly 2 transactions, the sale of a plot in North Denver in 2019 and another in the South area in 2020. These transactions represent roughly 8% of Mr. Johnson's total estate." Dr. Harris tried to argue. "Dr. William, we have documents proving partnership in other transactions. Can you present those documents? Because the ones we have here show Mr. Johnson worked independently on most of his business." Robert grew visibly nervous. "Dr. William, perhaps we can reach a friendly agreement." "Of course," Dr. William replied calmly. "We're willing to pay Mr. Miller his rightful share, 8% of the total, which comes to approximately $160,000. Robert's expression changed drastically. It was much less than he expected. "This is unacceptable. Michael owes me far more than this." Tyler, who had been silent until then, spoke for the first time. "Mr. Robert, you knew my father. Do you think he was the kind of man who would cheat a business partner?" Tyler's simple, direct question disarmed Robert. "Of course not, Tyler. Your father was an honest man." "Then why are you trying to take money that isn't yours?" Robert had no answer. Dr. Harris tried to intervene, but Tyler continued. "My mother and I spent 3 years living in fear because of your threats. We hid, we struggled, all because you refused to accept that my father left most of his money to his family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Tyler's honesty even moved Dr. Harris. It was hard to keep pressuring a child who had suffered so much. Dr. Williams seized the moment. "Gentlemen, we're offering a fair and legal solution. Mr. Robert receives his rightful share, and the Johnson family keeps what legally belongs to them." After a long discussion, Robert finally accepted the deal. He truly had no documents proving he was entitled to more money, and the presence of a skilled lawyer had completely shifted the balance of the negotiation. With the legal issue resolved, Susan and Tyler could finally breathe easy. For the first time in 3 years, there was no constant fear hanging over their heads. "Mom," Tyler said one evening as they ate dinner at home, "now that we don't have to hide anymore, what should we do with the money?" It was a question Susan had asked herself many times, but she'd never allowed herself to dream of the answer. "What would you like to do, son?" Tyler thought for a moment. "I want to go to a better school. I want to take English classes. I want you to stop working late nights sewing." "And what else?" "I want us to buy our own house, so we never have to fear eviction again. I want you to fulfill your dreams too." Susan smiled. "You know what my biggest dream is, Tyler?" "What?" "To see you grow up happy and secure. And that's already happening." In the months that followed, Susan and Tyler used the money wisely. They bought a small but cozy home in a safe neighborhood. Tyler was enrolled in a private school where he quickly excelled in his studies. Susan set up a professional sewing studio, no longer out of necessity but for pleasure. She discovered she enjoyed teaching other women to sew, creating an income stream independent of the inherited money. "Mom," Tyler said one afternoon, watching her teach a group of women decorative stitches, "you seem happier now." "I am happy, son. For the first time in years, I'm truly happy. You know what else makes me happy?" "What?" "Knowing my father was an honest man, that the money he left was earned through hard work." Susan hugged her son. "Your father would be proud of the man you're becoming." "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you regret hiding the money all those years?" Susan considered the question. "Tyler, I protected you the only way I knew how. Maybe it wasn't the best way, but it was done with love." "I understand, Mom, and I'm grateful you protected me." 6 months later, Tyler made a proposal that surprised Susan. "Mom, I want to create an educational fund for kids like me, who can't afford to go to good schools." "That's a beautiful idea, son, but are you sure?" "I am. I want other kids to have the opportunities I almost didn't get." Susan was moved by her son's maturity. At 12, he was already thinking of ways to help others. "How would this fund work?" "We can set aside part of the money and use the earnings to pay for underprivileged children's education. Cousin Margaret can help us choose the children since she works at a school." Tyler's idea became a reality. They created the Michael Johnson Educational Foundation in honor of the father Tyler never really knew, but whose inheritance would now give other children access to education. Margaret agreed to coordinate the foundation in Washington, D.C., while Susan and Tyler managed the activities in Denver. The first group of 5 children was selected to receive full scholarships. "Tyler," Susan said during the ceremony for the first scholarships, "your father would be so proud to see how you're using the money he left." "You really think so, Mom?" "I'm sure of it. He always wanted you to grow up to be a good person, and that's exactly what's happening." The story could have ended there, with mother and son living happily with the money finally legalized and put to good use. But life is rarely that simple. One Thursday afternoon, 2 years after resolving the issue with Robert, Susan received a call that would change everything again. "Hello? Susan, it's Michael." Susan nearly dropped the phone. The voice was unmistakably that of her ex-husband, the man who had left when Tyler was little, and whom everyone believed had disappeared forever. "Michael? Is this some kind of joke?" "It's no joke, Susan. It's really me. I need to talk to you and Tyler." "Michael, you left 9 years ago. You let your son grow up thinking he had no father." I know, and I can explain everything." "Susan, can I come over? It's important." Susan was in complete shock. How was Michael alive? Where had he been all these years? And why was he coming back now? Michael, I don't know if this is a good idea. Susan, I know about the money. I know you had trouble with Robert. I know Tyler found out everything. How do you know that? Because I've been watching from afar. I can't explain over the phone. Can I come over tonight? Susan looked around the house they had bought, thought of her son at school, thought of the stable life they had finally built. Michael, Tyler doesn't know you're alive. This is going to be a terrible shock for him. I understand, but I need to talk to you both. There are things I have to explain. Against her better judgment, Susan agreed to the meeting. Come at 8 tonight. But Michael, if you hurt my son in any way, I would never hurt Tyler, Susan. He's my son too. When Tyler got home from school, Susan was visibly nervous. He immediately sensed something was wrong. Mom, did something happen? Tyler, sit down. I need to tell you something very important. Tyler sat on the couch, bracing himself for yet another life-changing revelation. Your father called. He's alive, Tyler. The boy fell silent for a long moment, as if processing impossible news. My father is alive. He is, and he wants to talk to us tonight. Where has he been all these years? I don't know, son. He said he'd explain everything. Tyler stood up and began pacing the room, trying to organize his thoughts. Mum, does this mean he left us on purpose, that he chose to stay away? Tyler, we don't know anything yet. Let's hear what he has to say. What if he wants to take the money? What if he wants to take me with him? Susan hugged her son, feeling his anxiety. Tyler, nothing will change between us. You're my son, no matter what your father says or does. Mom, I'm scared. Me too, son. But we'll face this together, like we always have. At exactly 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Susan and Tyler exchanged a glance before she went to open the door. Michael Johnson stood in the doorway, visibly older with graying hair, but still recognizable as the man Susan had loved years ago. Hi, Susan. Michael. They looked at each other for a moment, a decade of hurt and longing silently passing between them. Can I come in? Susan stepped aside, letting him enter. Michael glanced around the new house, noticing the improvements money had brought. You've made a lovely home here. Tyler appeared in the living room, and Michael saw for the first time the son he had left as a small child, now a 13-year-old teenager. Tyler. Dad. The word carried conflicting emotions. Tyler had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was happening, he didn't know how to feel. Michael approached slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. You've grown so much. Becoming a man. Where have you been? Tyler asked. His voice weighted with a maturity no 13-year-old should have. Michael sighed and sat in an armchair. It's a long story, Tyler, and not a pretty one. We want to hear it, Susan said, sitting beside her son on the couch. Michael began to tell a story neither of them expected. After leaving Denver, he had moved to Costa Rica, where he lived under a false identity for years. Why did you do that? Susan asked. Because I found out Robert was involved with very dangerous people. Not drug dealers or anything like that, but people laundering money through land deals. He wanted to force me into the scheme. And you refused? I refused and threatened to expose him. That's when he said he wouldn't hesitate to use the two of you to pressure me. Said an accident could happen to anyone. Tyler was shocked. So you left to protect us? I left because I was a coward, Michael said, tears in his eyes. I should have gone to the authorities, should have found another way, but I was so scared I just ran. Susan felt a mix of anger and understanding. Michael, you left us alone. Tyler grew up without a father. I know, and it tortures me every day. But Susan, if I had stayed, you both could have been hurt. How did you know we resolved things with Robert? Tyler asked. Because I have a friend in Denver who keeps me updated about you. He told me about the lawyer, the settlement, everything. Susan was outraged. You've been spying on us all these years? I've been worried about you all these years. When I heard Robert was pressuring you, I almost came back. But then I learned you'd handled it on your own. Tyler asked the question at the heart of it all. Dad, why are you coming back now? Michael looked at his son with deep sorrow. Because I'm sick, Tyler. The doctors gave me 6 months to live. The silence that followed was deafening. Susan felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet, and Tyler seemed unable to process the news. Sick how? Susan asked. Liver cancer. It's very advanced. Tyler stood abruptly. No, I just found my father, and now I'm going to lose him again? Tyler, Michael began. No, this isn't fair. You left when I was little. Let me grow up without a dad, and now you come back just to die. Tyler's anger was understandable and heartbreaking. Son, I know it's not fair, but I wanted to know you. Wanted you to know I've always loved you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have left, Tyler shouted before running to his room. Susan was left alone with Michael in the living room, both processing the drama that had just unfolded. Susan, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but can I spend these last few months near you? Susan looked at the man she had loved, had abandoned, had protected from afar, and who now returned to die. Michael, I'm not sure this is a good idea. Tyler is finally stable, happy. Your coming back could ruin that. I understand, but Susan, he has the right to know his father, and I have the right to try to make up for the lost years. Susan stood up and walked to the window, gazing at the garden she had planted with such care. Michael, if you stay, it has to be on Tyler's terms. If he wants distance, you respect it. If he wants closeness, you can't disappear again. I promise, Susan. And Michael, you won't die in our house. Tyler won't go through that trauma again. Michael nodded. It was more than he deserved, and he knew it. In the days that followed, Tyler wavered between wanting to know his father and wanting him to leave again. Sometimes they talked for hours about soccer, school, and plans for the future. Other times, Tyler barely looked at Michael. Mom, Tyler said one afternoon, why does life have to be so complicated? I don't know, son. Sometimes people make mistakes and the consequences last a long time. Do you think I should forgive, Dad? Tyler, forgiveness isn't something you owe someone. It's something you give when you're ready, if you want to give it. But he's dying, Mom. If I don't forgive him now, I might never get the chance. Son, you can forgive him after he's gone. Forgiveness doesn't have an expiration date. But Tyler wanted to forgive. Despite the anger, despite the hurt, he wanted peace with his father. The moment of reconciliation came on a Sunday afternoon when Tyler found Michael sitting in the garden, looking at the plants Susan had nurtured. Dad? Hi, Tyler. Can I sit here? Of course. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the flowers sway in the gentle breeze. Dad, I want to understand. Tell me exactly why you left. Michael took a deep breath and told the whole truth, the details about Robert's threats, the fear he felt for them, the cowardice that made him run instead of fight. Tyler, I was young and didn't know how to handle the situation. I thought leaving was the best way to protect you. But Dad, you left us alone to face the problems you created. I know, son, and that's something I'll never forgive myself for. Tyler was thoughtful for a moment. Dad, do you regret it? I regret leaving, but I don't regret protecting you. But Dad, we didn't need protection. We needed you. Those simple words struck Michael more deeply than any accusation could. You're right, Tyler. I failed as a father. Dad, everyone fails, but not everyone comes back to try and make it right. Tyler looked at his father with impressive maturity. I forgive you, Dad, not because you deserve it, but because I need to forgive to move forward. Michael began to cry, and for the first time since his return, Tyler hugged him. Thank you, son. Thank you for giving me this chance. Michael's last months were spent getting to know the son he had lost. He watched Tyler excel in school, saw the Educational Foundation's project in action, and witnessed the generous, intelligent young man Susan had raised alone. Susan, Michael said in one of his last conversations with his ex-wife, you did an amazing job with Tyler. We did, Michael. You contributed too, even from afar. How? The money you left, the lessons about honesty you taught in your letter, the strength Tyler developed dealing with your absence, all of that made him who he is today. Michael smiled weakly. You've always been too generous with me, Susan. Michael, you made mistakes. But deep down, You were a good man, and Tyler knows that. When Michael passed away, it was in a hospital in Washington, D.C. with Susan and Tyler by his side. Margaret was also there, offering support during the final moments. Tyler held his father's hand as he passed peacefully. "Dad, thank you for coming back. Thank you for giving me the chance to know you." The funeral was small, attended only by family and a few close friends. Tyler made sure to speak about his father, sharing not just his mistakes, but also his courage in returning to face the consequences of his choices. "My father wasn't perfect," Tyler said during the service, "but he taught me it's never too late to try to make things right. That true love sometimes means sacrifice, and that family is about forgiveness and second chances." After the funeral, Susan and Tyler returned to Denver with a sense of closure they hadn't felt before. "Mom," Tyler said on the drive back, "now we can really move forward." "What do you mean, son?" "Now there are no more secrets, no more fears. We can build our future without looking back." Susan smiled, realizing Tyler was right. For the first time in over a decade, they were completely free. In the years that followed, Tyler became an exceptional young man. He graduated as one of the top students in his class and earned a full scholarship to study law at the University of Colorado. "Mom," Tyler said on his high school graduation day, "I want to specialize in family law. I want to help other families going through tough situations like ours." Susan was too proud to speak. Her son had turned all their pain into purpose. The Michael Johnson Educational Foundation grew and expanded. By the time Tyler entered college, over 50 children had received scholarships. "Tyler," Margaret said during a visit to Denver, "your father would be so proud to see what you've done with his legacy." "Cousin Margaret, I think Dad always knew we'd do the right thing. That's why he left the money with us." Tyler was right. Michael had trusted that Susan would raise a good man and that together they would use the money to make a difference in the world. When Tyler graduated from law school 5 years later, he opened a practice specializing in family law, focusing on cases of parental abandonment and inheritance disputes. "Mom," Tyler said on the day the firm opened, "I want you to be my partner." "Son, I don't know anything about the law, but you know how to care for people. You know how to protect families. That's exactly what our firm will do." Susan agreed, and together they built one of the most respected law firms in Denver, dedicated to helping families in vulnerable situations. Their first client was a young single mother who discovered her ex-husband had hidden assets during their divorce. "Mrs. Johnson," the client said, "do you really think I can get back what's rightfully mine?" Susan looked at Tyler, who smiled and nodded. "Ma'am," Susan replied, "if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that the truth always finds a way, and we'll help you find that way." Years later, when Tyler was an accomplished attorney and Susan a respected counselor, they looked back with gratitude instead of bitterness. "Mom," Tyler said one afternoon as they reviewed cases in their office, "do you regret anything?" Susan thought about the question. Did she regret hiding the money, lying to Tyler, living in fear for so long? "Tyler, I don't regret protecting you, but I do regret not finding the courage sooner to face our problems head-on." "Mom, you did the best you could at the time, and look where we are now." Tyler was right. They had turned years of suffering into a life's mission. The money that nearly destroyed them had become the foundation for helping hundreds of other families. "Tyler," said Susan, "do you know what my greatest achievement in life is?" "What is it, Mom?" "Seeing the incredible man you've become. A man who uses his difficult experiences to help others." "Mom, that was only possible because you never gave up on me. Even when everything seemed lost, you kept fighting." They embraced mother and son, who had faced more challenges than most people do in a lifetime, yet emerged stronger and more united. The law firm Johnson & Sons had become a benchmark in Colorado for complex family law cases. Tyler was invited to speak at universities about family ethics and social responsibility. "Every family has its battles," Tyler would say in his lectures. "What matters isn't avoiding problems, but facing them with love, honesty, and courage." Susan also became a respected figure, guiding single mothers and families in vulnerable situations. She never remarried, dedicating her life to her son and the work they had built together. "Mrs. Johnson," a client once asked, "have you ever thought about rebuilding your love life?" "My dear," Susan replied, "I've rebuilt my life every day beside my son. Sometimes, the most important love we have is the love already in our home." The Michael Johnson Educational Foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary when Tyler turned 30. Over 200 children had benefited, many now graduated and building their own careers. At the foundation's anniversary celebration, Tyler gave an emotional speech. "My father left money, but more importantly, he left a lesson. Our true legacy isn't what we accumulate for ourselves, but what we share with others." Margaret, now 70, was present at the celebration. "Tyler," she said, "your father is proud of you, wherever he is." "Aunt Margaret, I think Dad always knew everything would work out. He believed in us, even when we doubted ourselves." That night, alone at home, Susan reread the letter Michael had left years ago for the last time. The words about dangerous people and protection seemed to belong to another life, a time of fear and uncertainty that no longer existed. She placed the letter in a memory box alongside photos of Tyler as a child, his school and university diplomas, and news clippings about the foundation's success. "Michael," she said to her ex-husband's photo, "we did it. We raised an amazing son and made a difference in the world. Thank you for believing in us." The next morning, Tyler arrived at the office with a new proposal. "Mom, I want to expand our work. I'd like to create a free family mediation program for low-income families. How would it work, son? Many families fall apart over problems that could be resolved through dialogue. I want to create a space where people can talk with trained mediators before issues become irreversible." Susan smiled. Tyler never stopped thinking of ways to help others. "That's a wonderful idea, son. As always, you have my full support." The family mediation program launched 6 months later, offering free services to families in crisis. The first case involved a couple divorcing due to communication issues. "Dr. Johnson," the woman said during the session, "we love each other, but we can't talk without fighting." "Ma'am," Tyler replied, "sometimes love isn't enough. We need to learn how to communicate that love in a way the other understands." After 3 mediation sessions, the couple decided against divorce and sought marriage counseling instead. It was the first of many success stories. Years passed, and Tyler married Emily Parker, a social worker he met during one of the firm's projects. They had 2 children, Michael, named after his grandfather, and Olivia. "Grandma Susan," little Michael said when he was 5, "my daddy told me you're the bravest person in the world." "And why did he say that, sweetheart?" "Because you took care of him all by yourself when he was little like me." Susan hugged her grandson, feeling the circle of life complete. "My dear, it wasn't bravery, it was love. When we love someone, we find strength we never knew we had." Tyler watched from the kitchen door, moved to see his mother with their grandchildren. "Emily," he said to his wife, "look at this. My mum spent years thinking she'd failed me, and now she's passing love on to a new generation. Tyler, your mum never failed. She gave you the most important lesson. That family is about being there, even when things are hard." When Tyler turned 40, he had become one of the most respected attorneys in the state of Colorado. The firm Johnson & Sons had helped thousands of families, the Educational Foundation had benefited over 500 children, and the family mediation program had an 80% success rate. But more important than any professional recognition was the peace Tyler had found within himself and his past. "Mom," he said during a family dinner, "you saved my life in ways you can't even imagine." "How so, son?" "You taught me it's possible to be strong without being harsh, to protect without being controlling, to love without smothering. Everything I am today I learned by watching you." Susan, now 60, with graying hair and wrinkles that told stories of smiles and worries, looked around the table. Tyler, Emily Parker, the grandchildren, the life they'd built together. "Tyler, you want to know the truth? I've never regretted hiding that money." "Why, Mom?" "Because those hard years taught us the value of what truly matters. If we'd used the money from the start, maybe we'd never have found our inner strength. Maybe we'd never have learned to lean on each other." Tyler nodded, understanding perfectly. "Mom, The struggles prepared us to use the money wisely. Exactly. And more importantly, they taught us to cherish what really counts. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Tyler found an envelope on his office desk. It was from a client he'd helped years ago, a single mother who had managed to secure child support through his work. Dr. Tyler and Mrs. Susan, my daughter graduated as a doctor this week. She said she wants to work in underserved communities to repay the help you gave us. You didn't just save our family, you started a chain of kindness that will last for generations. Thank you for teaching us there's always hope. The next morning, Tyler showed the letter to Susan. Mum, look at this. We helped one family, and now they're raising a doctor who will help other families. Son, that's the real legacy we leave behind. It's not the money, it's the lives we touch and change. End of story. Now, tell me what you thought of this story of resilience and courage. Do you believe Susan made the right decision by hiding the money to protect Tyler? Share your honest thoughts in the comments about this emotional journey of mother and son. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other touching stories like this one.